Baseline and needs assessment for the provision of non-criminal primary justice services in Sierra Leone. In 2017, the Open Society Initiative for West Africa, Osiwa, conducted a nationwide survey in Sierra Leone on the legal needs of the population. The purpose of the study was to provide better and deeper understanding and knowledge of the legal needs of Sierra Leoneans and the different strategies they employ in response, including the various mechanisms that come into play for such needs. The study further explored the choices available to the population in solving their problems, including understanding the dispute resolution mechanisms preferred against others. The problems explored included family, housing, land, welfare benefits, consumer, employment, business, debt, non-violent crime, violent crime, injury, public services, obtaining ID and digital ICT. The findings of the study included the following. Personal level analysis. 1,058 respondents were drawn from across the 14 geopolitical districts of Sierra Leone. 609, about 58%, reported having faced one or more legal issues or disputes at some point in the previous 2 years, or 527, about 50%, if only civil legal problems are included. Problems were more often reported by younger respondents, those married, separated or divorced, and those who completed formal education or training. Family problems were the most common problem type, followed by problems concerning crime, housing, land, consumer issues, debt and injuries. Family problems were associated with those who were divorced or separated. Problems concerning land were associated with those working in agriculture, those with other educational backgrounds, and older respondents. Consumer problems were associated with those on higher incomes and those with higher levels of education, with the latter also associated with problems concerning ICT. Problems concerning injury were associated with those on low incomes, while those on housing and violent crime were associated with younger respondents, and business-related problems with those with a disability. Problem level analysis. Detailed data was collected for 850 problems, including 632 civil problems. 86% of the problems impacted negatively on respondents' lives. Common consequences were stress or some other mental or physical ill health, violence or harassment, and loss of income. The most impactful problems were those concerning family, employment, and injury. Respondents acted to resolve 66% of problems. Action was least likely for debt, consumer, crime, and employment-related problems. Rates of action also varied between chiefdoms. Not knowing what to do, not having enough money, or not believing that action would achieve a positive result, despite not having obtained expert opinion on the matter, accounted for the reasons given in respect of more than half of all problems where no action was taken. Respondents obtained help in relation to just under half of problems, most often from family, followed by friends and neighbors. Independent help was obtained for 9% of problems, most often from a lawyer or other expert. The legal sector was turned to in just under 5% of cases. Lawyers were most commonly used in relation to housing, land, and business problems. Obtaining independent help varied significantly by problem type, with independent help most associated with problems concerning land, housing, business, and obtaining ID. Unemployed, agricultural, and non-agricultural employed respondents were more likely to obtain advice than others. Obtaining help also varied between chiefdoms. 14% of problems involved engagement with the other side for dialogue or reconciliation. 13% saw conciliation, mediation, or arbitration arranged with an appropriate body. 11% were mediated or arbitrated by an informal community leader or organization. 9% involved a designated authority, and 7% a religious body for mediation. 8% were described as either seeing formal court or tribunal process initiated or there being a court tribunal hearing, although just 4% were said to have involved a court or tribunal hearing. The police investigated 13% of the problems, with problems concerning violent crime the most common. 37% of problems were completely resolved and 36% ongoing. 13% were unresolved, with respondents unable to do anything more about them. 8% were unresolved, with respondents not wanting to do anything more about them, and 6% were forgotten about. Problems most often resolved through engagement through an intermediary, followed by a court or similar tribunal, the decision of a public official, direct engagement with the other party, mediation, the decision of an informal court leader, and informal mechanisms. In 13% of cases, the process of dispute resolution had a severe negative effect on respondents. Informal mechanisms were associated with such an effect. In the majority of cases, respondents felt outcomes were fair in distributive, restorative, functional, and transparency terms. Those whose problems had been resolved through a court or similar tribunal most often strongly agreed that distributive justice had been served. Around 2/3 of respondents rated the importance of access to legal information and advice as very high, high, or moderately high. Just under half of respondents were aware of the Legal Aid Board, although those earning above 1 million leon were significantly less likely to be so. By far, the most common means by which respondents became aware of the Legal Aid Board was via the radio. After friends and relatives, government bodies and officials were most often considered to be among the 3 most useful sources of legal information or advice. Barriers to obtaining legal advice. More than 2/3 of respondents considered there are barriers to obtaining legal advice, with cost the most commonly reported barrier. Those with a disability were more likely than others to refer to proximity and availability or relevance as barriers. While non-judicial dispute resolution mechanisms were perceived as being more accessible than judicial mechanisms appear to be more trusted. More broadly, while a small majority of respondents indicated they trusted the judiciary and courts, a significant minority expressed a negative opinion. But respondents were more positive about how courts treat people and the decision-making of courts. Nevertheless, there was a sense that courts protect the interest of the rich and powerful above those of ordinary people. 69% of respondents indicated that they trusted the Legal Aid Board, with fewer than 20% of respondents expressing a negative opinion. The picture was similar for non-government legal aid organizations.